Police officers of Reddit. What's the stupidest, unluckiest criminal you've faced? Story 1A 911 call from some little kids playing on the phone. The father was asleep and they kept trying to wake him up when the 911 operator asked to speak to an adult. He kept yelling, "No, leave me alone. Now we have to send someone since we can't verify there's no emergency." Upon arrival, officers ask for ID and the mother has a warrant. Story 2 Not an officer but my ex-boss' son got arrested. He didn't have a license because of a prior driving under the influence of drugs conviction and was on his way to college in Colorado. He was still in Kansas, and his mother who had sworn to boss she would not let him drive got tired and let him drive, so he goes too fast and gets pulled over. No license, well that's trouble. The cop asks permission to search the vehicle and they find pot. He was in an area where simple possession was still a misdemeanor, so still not too bad. Then the cop asks him about his pot use and brain-dead kid says, "Oh officer, I don't smoke it, I just have it so I can sell it when I get to school if I need money." Instant felony. Story 3 Kid gets arrested for shoplifting and the first thing he says to the cop is, "I didn't steal that car this morning." The cops originally had zero reason to suspect this kid stole and crashed a car, until he said that, went from misdemeanor to felony in about 2 minutes. Story 4 Military police here. I was on patrol by myself working a night shift. I get a call on the radio to head to my squadron to pick up a person that would be riding along with me. As I arrive, I notice that it was the base commander. He wanted to ride along on patrol and get first-hand look at what his enlisted cops had to deal with on a Saturday night in base housing. This sort of thing never happens. You'll have better odds winning the lottery without playing than for the base commander to come out and do this sort of thing. So I pulled up to one of the more famous intersections in the housing area for people running the stop sign. We're sitting in the car and making small talk when he spots a car that didn't make a complete stop. He tells me to stop him and find out what their deal is. He approaches the car with me and we begin to talk to the driver. Instantly I smell alcohol emitting from his breath. I begin to say to myself that this guy is the unluckiest man in the military right now to get pulled over by the base commander while driving drunk. After conducting the standardized field sobriety tests on him and seeing how bad he did on them, he begins to break down emotionally. The base commander gets on the phone with this guy's squadron commander to include everyone in his chain of command and have them meet with him in his office in about 30 minutes. I'm putting the cuffs on this guy with another patrol as my backup when the suspect turns to us and tells us that he was set to retire the following month after 24 years of service. Now I don't know the outcome of this guy's situation, but I can definitely say it wasn't good. Story 5 Working in a prison. I met a complete idiot who was in for arson and attempted murder. This guy was gay and had been living with his new boyfriend. He also had some mental issues and smoked a lot of weed which would make him paranoid. He became convinced that his boyfriend was having an affair with a guy who lived in the apartment across the hall, and one day he was home alone and thought he could hear them having a conversation in there. He broke in, and found that the guy had just left the TV on, but because he was already in he thought he'd trash the guy's apartment anyway. He made a mess of the place, then turned the gas on, lined up a bunch of gas canisters and lit a small fire in the dining room. The fire alarms went off. The building was evacuated and the guy went outside with everyone else to wait for the firefighters to turn up. He tried to light a cigarette but realized that he had left his lighter back upstairs, so he went back inside to get it. He made it to his floor just as the apartment exploded and one of the gas canisters' head left in there flew through the door and hit him in the head. Luckily he'd done a shitty job of trying to cause an explosion. Most of the damage was to his own apartment through a shared wall and the only person he'd managed to injure was himself. His boyfriend was at work and the guy across the hall wasn't even gay. Story 6 Not a cop. Heard a great story from one though. Officer pulled a girl going 15 over the speed limit on the highway. After she got her ticket and was free to go, the girl tore off, speeding again, and got pulled by another officer a few miles later. Somehow she still didn't learn her lesson. The third officer to pull her that day arrived at her window nearly crying with laughter, saying, "You do know we have radios, right?" Story 7 I'm not a cop but I recently went to a sheriff training center to take the test to become one. One of the other candidates thought it was a good idea to bring nunchucks. He decided to whip them out and show them off to some deputies who were posted outside the center. He was arrested. One cop walked in and said, "If you think it's a good idea to bring illegal weapons to the cop test, then you may as well not even be here today. I learned nunchucks are illegal in CA that day." Story 8 My dad was a police officer and one of my favorite stories of his is when he was chasing a guy who ditched his car and took off during a traffic stop. The guy ran about 1 block, jumped over a concrete barrier and dropped. It was a good 20-foot fall down to the freeway and the guy broke his leg. My dad ran over and looked down as the guy crawled to the middle, climbed, rolled over between the concrete barriers blocking the 2 directions. He called down, "That's a good spot. Just hang out there," and then radioed for his partner to bring the car around. Overall the guy was fine but my dad said he lived in the area and either panicked and forgot where he was or knew he was jumping that far and thought he would make it. Story 9 We've had several over the years who have broken into a house or car and then left on foot following a snowstorm. No need for a K9 to track them down. Edit also had a guy who had shoplifted and he knew we were looking for him in the mall. We found him hiding in a store and also found the weed he had tried to hide in the pocket of a jacket near where he was hiding. He denied the weed being his until I opened up the paper it was crumpled up in. It was his bond paperwork from the day before where he had been arrested for shoplifting. I took him back in front of the same judge who had released him so he could be arraigned on his new charges. She was not happy with him and revoked his prior bond. Also had a guy dine and dash, but left his wallet with ID on the table. Edit, fixed bullet points. Story 10. My dad was a cop in the housing projects in Brooklyn. Once there was a report of trespassing and him and his partner had to clear every floor of this building. They get to the roof, and find a man, shoving a full, unpeeled banana up his. My dad loved telling me this story, and it never fails to make me giggle. We never did find out why he was doing it though. Story 11. My family is good friends with a local sheriff. He's told me a story where an officer pulled over a man who was quite obviously under the influence. When he went to the car to talk to the man, he noticed him making a stabbing motion towards his leg. The man had stabbed himself with a screwdriver and tried to say he'd been stabbed at a bar and was heading to the ER. He was heading out of town, in the direction where the next hospital or clinic was about 45 minutes away, and that's why his driving was wonky. If he'd been caught with another DUI, he'd have lost his license. He ended up losing his license anyways, and had a lot of hospital bills to pay. Story 12. Not my story, but a burglar in New Zealand got the fright of his life when he walked into a home in the pitch blackness and ran smack into a corpse. Evidently the homeowner hung himself prior to the robbery. He was nice enough to notify police though, so they decided not to charge him. Story 13. I was working as a mechanic about 15 years ago. I worked on a Ford Explorer that reeked of weed, looked in the center console and found a couple of glass pipes and an empty baggie, fixed the issue it came in for, and the kid that owned it came to pick it up. First thing he does is check the center console. He gets out and says I stole all his weed. My boss comes down and asks if I took it. Nope. Tell him they can check my locker, my toolbox, my pockets, and he'll take a drug test. Not good enough for the kid. He calls the cops to report the theft of his weed. A couple officers actually show up and start investigating. Kid shows them his center console where the weed was, and since I was the only one to work on it, I must have taken it. I told them the same I told my boss. They did a cursory search, went back to the kid and cited him for possession of paraphernalia. I got a random 2 days later. I worked there for about 6 more years. Story 14. I'm one of 2 civilian employees at a PD. We get our regulars. And this guy is one of them. Recently, he got out of jail and decided he was going to go visit his girlfriend that same day. The only problem is, she had a no-contact order out against him. She calls the police and they come to pick him up. He also had some other illegal things on him, so he got taken straight back to jail. Had only been out for a few hours. But wait, there's more. So, his girlfriend has a no-contact order against him, which isn't like a restraining order where you can't go within a certain distance of them, it's literally no contacting them. Well, this smart guy decides he really wants to talk to his girlfriend, so he called her from jail 3 times, she called the police again and they went back to the jail and added more charges. Violation of a protective order X4. He was smart enough to violate a protective order while he was in jail. Edit, he knew about the no-contact order. He was served with it in jail before he got out and broke it. Those don't become active until they are served. They thought maybe he didn't understand it when they were about to take him to jail. He was going anyway because of the other illegal stuff he had and specifically told him that it included phone calls. Police officers are technically civilians, but they are also sworn into their office as officers. By civilian I just mean non-sworn. Civilian is how we refer to those non-sworn individuals, so a police department employee who is not a police officer. Story 15. A friend of mine was telling me about this one weekend where he and a friend of his got pulled over by the cops. His buddy was driving and right after they get pulled over he turns to my friend and says, "Watch this." He then gets out of the car and starts running down the street. The cops of course start chasing him and then all of a sudden, dude stops, turns around and says psych. The cops of course don't find it as funny as he dies and they tackle him to the ground. They were only about 17 or 18, so still pretty young at the time, but how stupid can you be that you would think that was a good idea? Story 16. I heard a good story once that took place in my hometown. From the halcyon days when light-up sneakers were not just for kids, a gentleman with such footwear decided it would be wise to flee on foot from a traffic stop into the pitch-dark woods. Story 17. There's this guy that was speeding and got pulled over. He had no ID and money on him, so he called his wife, told her he got caught for speeding and asked her to get him his items. In the meantime he started to chat with the cops. He got all interested in how their equipment works and as he seemed to be a nice guy, the cops let him point the laser gun at a car that was speeding into their direction. Long story short, he caught his own wife who was in a rush to bring him his ID and money. Story 18. I'm not a police officer. That said, back before the days of GPS or smartphones, I pulled over to find directions to a party in front of a cop's house. He was in his car, lights off, about to go on shift. I was 17, and consumed 4 beers a few hours prior. He pulled out of his driveway. An angle behind me stopped me for being a suspicious person. It didn't go well for me, passed the field sobriety tests, but still got hit with a DWI due to age-admitted consumption of alcohol. Edit, it was pretty dumb of me. Edit, I also had a tonneau cover on my truck at the time. I notified the officer he wouldn't like what he found underneath it. I was stupidly running around with 500 beer cans from a party at my parents' house the week prior. Story 19. Not an officer, but my roommate in college was trying to steal a street sign with a couple other guys. A cop car rolled up with its lights on and they all fled in different directions. Roommate ran a block away through backyards and hid in an open garage. He thought he was free, but a cop on foot found him almost immediately. It had snowed hard earlier that night and he just followed the tracks right to the garage. Story 20. This happened last week. We get a call to the projects at 0620 hours for a domestic and known drug apartment. while we are responding, our dispatcher is advising us that the caller complainant owns the apartment and that the couple that are staying with her are having the domestic. As we are getting closer, the dispatcher tells us that the couple is breaking everything in the apartment. We get there, everyone is calm, but the apartment has some furniture broken. We run everyone's licenses. The caller complainant has an active warrant. She gets arrested and proceeds to resist because she is high. The boyfriend has an order of protection against him from his girlfriend, who he is standing next to. He gets arrested. The girlfriend admits to breaking the furniture. She gets arrested. 3 for 3. Story 21. Not a cop, but I have a few that stand out from friends cops I've interacted with. First, our base's mental health psychologist was married to a highway patrolman. One time they were out at the local harbor with their kids, about to enjoy a late lunch. As they are walking up, about 100 yards away, they see a guy stumbling to his car. He proceeds to get in, and then instead of backing out, he goes forward into a plantain tree. Her husband casually walks over, reaches in, and takes the keys, cuffs the guy, and calls the local police. He learned as a rookie, always carry a set of cuffs even off duty, you never know. Next one, I was performing honor guard duties for Veterans Day, and they had us presenting the colors with a bunch of local officers. Before the event, we are all hanging out in a room, and we ask, what's the funniest most up story you have? One local cop says, I have this, and no one will top it. He told us how he had to arrest a 19-year-old for having with a 12-year-old in the 19-year-old's van. When they arrested the 19-year-old, he stated, but I thought she was 14. In California, the law is if there is a 5-year or less difference, they won't prosecute unless the parent's victim wants to. Unfortunately, that only applies to minors who are 16 and up, so 14, still very illegal. Story 22. My situation was shitty. Went on a cross-country vacation, coast to coast, with girlfriend and a buddy, Grand Canyon, Yosemite, Rocky Mountains, Las Vegas, California beaches, Mississippi River, saw America, get pulled over for dead tags on our rental car in Kansas. After almost 3 weeks driving no problem. Turns out our friend bought a few THC sodas in CO. We all get arrested and charged with smuggling pounds of weed, because they went off the weight of the sodas. Now I'm a felon, get put on probation, but my PO misses 7 of 10 appointments before being fired. Get a new PO who realizes Kansas didn't send the correct paperwork. When they transferred the file to my home state, Kansas doesn't respond. Turns out the person from Kansas got a new job, so my file went missing. My probation period ends and I think everything is okay. I paid the fine, did community service, called Kansas, and my name isn't even in the system. Kansas doesn't even have a record of my name in the system as ever being in trouble. A few weeks later, while visiting a friend on a military base, I get arrested for an outstanding warrant from Kansas. They have the wrong address, social security number, claim I never paid my fines, did no community service, didn't show up to probation meetings, and failed multiple drug tests. They even have me listed as fleeing Kansas to hide in VA. After sitting in jail for 2 weeks, I get a bond in VA and salvage my job and start trying to figure out what is going on. My lawyer in Kansas can't get any info, so I drive back to Kansas to find out what is going on. The courthouse repeats that no one with my name is in the system. Probation office tells me they don't know what is going on. Try the sheriffs. Sheriffs tell me they don't have a warrant for me and to just go back home to VA. Return to VA, and 2 weeks later have VA sheriffs at my door with a governor's warrant. I'm never shown the warrant, told he'll get a copy later. Jail never gives me a copy. But 2 weeks later a judge gives me a new bond, the LT, for the jail holds me another day, against judge's orders for a transport service to come pick me up, spend 5 days shackled in the back of a van, on the way to Kansas. Upon arriving in Kansas, the judge sets my bond at $100K. I explain the situation and he calls me a liar and says he will see me in 3 weeks. My lawyer comes in 2 weeks later and tells the judge the exact same thing I told him and drops my bond down to $500. I spend the next month in a hotel in Kansas waiting for trial, burning through the last of my savings. Judge dismisses my case at trial. No new evidence, nothing, not a thing changed in the 3 months I was locked up from when I was released. Lost my job of 6 years, all my savings. Things aren't good with a girlfriend, and nothing changed from the day I was arrested to the day I was released, except a judge realized a few people up some paperwork somewhere, and it all started with dead tags on a rental car. 3 separate POs who were at their job, a LT who broke the law, and somehow that's justice in America. Story 23. Several years ago, my uncle, an officer, told me about a middle-aged illegal immigrant who had lived here since she was a teenager. She was a passenger in a taxicab that had run a red light. They checked her, found out she was here illegally, and started the process of deporting her. I don't know if it ever happened because he got transferred shortly thereafter, but that one always kind of bothered me. Sure, after all these years she could have at least started the paperwork, but what a way to get caught. Story 24. Not a police officer, but my dad is, and I just happened to be in the car for this event. Once when I was about 11 or 12, my dad, who was off duty at the time, sees a guy running away from a liquor store when a police car pulls in. Now my dad, being himself, speeds across a busy intersection to help, with me in the car of course. He pulls up to the curb and tackles the guy, all done in cowboy boots by the way. The original police officer runs up and it is seen that he is not on duty either. This guy happened to steal booze in front of 2 off-duty cops. What are the chances? Story 25. Military police here. Thing about getting into trouble in the service is that for some things like a DUI you get into trouble both with us and the local law enforcement. there was this real junior guy who was driving back to his barracks room drunk. Somehow he went completely off the road and crashed into a fire hydrant. Up his new car and did a pretty considerable amount of property damage too. Anyways, this guy decides that before we get there, he's going to leave. That's not so dumb. The dumb part's when he walks back to the scene an hour later, claiming he had his car stolen and this was the first he had seen it. Not only did he still have his keys on him, and I guess there was a witness that put him at the scene, but he is also very visibly drunk and injured. He was also underage, which on the civilian side might not count for much, but in the military you can get in a lot of trouble just for that. When we bring him back to the station, he refuses to tell us who gave alcohol to a minor, which I guess means he's loyal, but when he's in that much trouble already he really should have just told us. Anyways, so in the end the guy not only has to pay hefty ticket, gets knocked down in rank, has to pay for his car and the property damage, but I'm pretty sure he got a dishonorable discharge as well. Getting that kind of discharge takes away pretty much all your benefits and makes it ridiculously hard to find a job. Obligatory, not a police officer statement, and the person involved wasn't a criminal but someone who was applying to the police academy. My mom had a classmate in a criminal justice class who brought his gun to school. This was the early 1980s. He had just purchased it and was excited about having it at long last. While he was putting the gun back in the holster, he forgot to put the safety on and ended up shooting himself in the foot. As far as I know, no one ever let him live it down and even sent him a get well card while he was in the hospital with a message. What kind of forgets to put the safety on? Sadly, I have no idea if he was ever accepted, but if he did, LAPD would have the dubious distinction of having an officer who is dumber than Chief Wiggum. Story 26 Unluckiest right here. One of our warrants deputies knew this guy. Let's call him Steve. Was at this house. He has a warrant for violation of parole. There's like 3 of us, 2 blocks down from this house. We walked on foot to catch him off guard, but he's actually in the front yard and sees us. He splits it into the backyard and runs in the woods. We lost him pretty quickly because he spotted us far away. Our chopper just so happened to be in the air, so they came to assist us in finding him, and we had a K9 out on patrol as well. Couldn't find him, so we went to his mom's house to see if we could find a way to make contact with Steve. One of my partners promises Steve's mom if she can get him to turn himself in, he won't charge him with evading. An hour later, Steve calls my partner and says he wants to turn himself in. Another deputy picks him up and meets us at jail. Our SGT calls us and breaks the news that we have charged Steve with evading police. Long story short, when the chopper was up and K9 walking around the neighborhood, someone in the neighborhood knew the sheriff personally and called to ask what was going on, rolls downhill through chain of command. And now my partner has to break a promise and charge Steve with evading. Now Steve is never going to trust police again because my partner had to break a promise unwillingly. TLDR, someone got an extra charge because of nosy neighbors. This fellow was arrested in the neighboring community of Ashland, Kentucky. Nothing has topped him yet. Story 27 Not a cop, but it was a story in my town's newspaper. So, this genius gets the bright idea to shoplift some movies and video games from my local Walmart. He puts the items in his shopping cart, picks up a box cutter from the tool aisle and finds a blind spot in the toy section. While trying to remove the box cutter from its package, he slices his hand open. In his ensuing panic, he throws blood all over the place and runs to the restroom. Security is alerted of the open package, and all they have to do is follow the blood trail, and they find the culprit crying and licking his wounds in one of the restroom stalls. On top of the shoplifting charge, he was also ordered to pay for all the items that got blood on them. I think it was around $250. TLDR, shoplifter sucks at hide and seek. Story 28 I have a bunch of stories. My dad is a RCMP officer and was stationed in Alberta for most of his career. On one occasion some guy was sitting in his attic with a gun waiting to kill police officers that were on their way to his residence. The dog handler was one of the guys that arrived on scene and sent his massive German Shepherd into the house. This thing was apparently pitch black and absolutely ferocious. The dog later died on duty and has a statue in BC. Anyways, this dog got into the attic and chased the gunman down, clamped onto his shoulder with his teeth and started tearing him apart. The guy panicked, fumbled with his gun, and in the ensuing chaos, blew his own head off. Dog was called off and my dad arrived in time to see the guy's body being pulled out of the attic. Story 29 Group of girls hands me a set of keys they took from a sloppy drunk kid who'd been unsuccessfully hitting them in a popular college bar and tried to get into his car and drive off. Said one of them flirted with him on the driver's side while her friend snuck in on the passenger side. Find the kid passed out behind the wheel of a car parked nearby. Passenger doors wide open but driver's doors closed and locked. Knocked on the window, strobed my flashlight at him for several minutes. Notice he's got half a dollar bill sticking out of the CD player like his final act of consciousness was hoping for a Snickers. Finally he wakes up, looks at me, thinks I'm telling him to move along, and tries to start the car but fails because there's no keys. Then he can't figure out how to unlock the car from inside. I figure I'll help him out and use the keys to unlock it, only to find out I'm holding Jeep keys, and he's sitting in a Chrysler. He blames the bar for letting him get so shitty. Still had no idea that wasn't his car. Shows me a military active duty Marine Corps ID instead of his regular DL in hopes of getting out of trouble. He's 19, has no friends to call and doesn't know where he's staying. Spends the rest of the trip to holding begging me not to tell his CO. Story 30 Not a police officer but it was almost me. Long story short, I was having a rough time in life. Just lost my job. House was robbed a bit later and I lost everything. Got a ticket for passing on a gravel shoulder. I was in lane for a right turn but over the white line as the turn lane was just starting. I had no money and couldn't pay the ticket, got a suspended license and warrant for failure to pay the ticket, got things together about a month later and went in to pay but accidentally went into the police station door rather than the court door. They were right next to each other. Told them I was there to take care of a ticket and he took my info and started to enter it. He stopped and asked if I was here to pay it. I said yes. He says, "Oh, you're in the wrong door. If I run your name you probably have a warrant and I'll have to arrest you even though you're here to pay. I thought you meant you were turning yourself in. Just go around the corner and you can take care of it there." That would have sucked hard if that happened. I'm not a cop but met a pretty stupid criminal on top of empty Shasta one day. He was a safecracker. After his first successful heist he tried again, tripped a silent alarm, got busted and went to prison. He got out after a few years and while he was on probation he drove past a police gym and thought he'll show you cops and steal their equipment. He loaded up his truck, didn't notice he had low fuel and while driving up a hill he couldn't get any more fuel into his engine and broke down, back to prison. Story 31. Group of friends mug a couple of tourists. One of the muggers is for some reason carrying his own passport, which he drops as they run off. Not quite the same, but I'm continually amazed at the number of drug users who expect to get their stash returned. The first time you're caught with a small quantity of cannabis in the UK you normally get given a caution there and then on the street, you don't get arrested or anything. I've dealt with more than a couple of people who genuinely expected that interaction will end with me handing back their drugs. Story 32. I responded to a break-in at an apartment complex last year. I had been making a list with a victim of everything that was taken when a neighbor approached me and said I saw the guy walk out of here with a TV and get in a car. She also had written down the license plate as best as she could remember. I continued my investigation inside the apartment and then it dawned on me that something about that license plate seemed familiar. I went straight back to my patrol car and looked at a citation I had written an hour prior to this call. It was the exact match of vehicle description she had given me and she was one digit off on the license plate. I had the guy's name and address from the ticket so I paid him a visit. When I got to the bad guy's apartment complex I immediately located the vehicle. In plain view was almost all of the items that the victim stated were taken, including a glass coin jar from Joe's Crab Shack. Bad guy was soon arrested and confessed, and recently was sentenced to 10 years in prison, repeat offender. Story 33. Not a cop, but know several because of a convenience store job I held where cops came frequently for free coffee and soda. It's related. We were really desperate for third shifters to the point where my boss hired a friend of my coworker. Kid was a complete moron. Had a face tattoo, was small and he was told to keep it covered with makeup, which, to his credit, he did. Had to have concepts explained to him multiple times. Could barely count change so we had to put him in the back doing stocking. One day, I get called in because he had apparently been arrested. He had apparently offered to sell drugs to another customer in the store. In full view of one of the 4 police officers that were in the store that day, they searched his car and found a mess of pills and pot. According to one of the cops, he claimed that he didn't know that they were in there since it was his mother's car, so they searched her house and found more. Both were arrested. Story 34. I've been an officer for many years and seen some up but nothing beats this one. This happened 2 years ago. I was on patrol when I got robbery in progress call. I get to the location within 5 minutes and about that time a morbidly obese 80-something-year-old shirtless woman comes driving out of the store on one of those electric wheelchair shopping cart hybrid things, flapping in the wind in all their baggy glory, with a gun in hand and as much in a basket as was physically possible. At this point she hasn't seen me so I hide behind a parked car as she's coming my way. As soon as she passes the car I rush her, take the gun out of her hand and arrest her. On the way to the jail this woman manages to slip out of her handcuffs and pull a stick of butter out of her pants and proceeds to rub my nipples with them. Story 35. We responded to a bank robbery in progress. Caller surprisingly gives us a good description of both the suspect and the vehicle he got in. Luckily I was only a couple blocks away. I pull on scene and holy, matching car is still right out front. I pull and draw down on the suspect. Backup gets there and we get him into custody, no issues. After speaking with the suspect, he was still sitting there because his car wouldn't start and he was sitting there cranking the key trying to get it to start. TLDR: when you rob a bank, leave your car running. Story 36. My uncle is a beat cop. He once had to intervene in a brawl between drunk chavs, and a night, apparently, 2 drunk louts decided to harass a street performer dressed in a genuine-looking plate armor. It quickly evolved into a hilarious fight where the chavs would wail at the impervious night and injure themselves by punching edges of steel plate. Before they were separated, one of the chavs was badly messed up by being headbutted by a guy in a steel helmet. Wisely, my uncle and his partner decided to let the night go, since the guy would normally face charges for using a weapon of sorts during a brawl. Story 37. I don't know any good stories firsthand, but there's a good stockpile of them over at Tales from the Squad Car. Story 38. Not a police officer, but a guy I know was smoking and had a lot of weed in his car and got pulled over 2 minutes after his headlight went out. He went to jail. Story 39. Guy with a Class C warrant for unpaid traffic ticket was scared to go to jail. He told my beat partner he didn't have his license on him, and gave his brother's name, date of birth and social. He received his citation, and later in the month attempted to pay them. You need ID to pay. Truth came out, and now there's a felony warrant out for his arrest for fraudulent use of identifying information. Story 40. My sister is a cop. She once turned on her lights to respond to a robbery, and a nearby car took off. Dispatch told her to pursue the car, as others were also responding to the robbery. After a high-speed chase through a residential neighborhood, he takes off on foot and escapes. In the car, he left a trunk full of ecstasy and his pissed-off girlfriend, who tells where he lives. Guy is busted on all kinds of charges for the chase and one of the biggest ecstasy busts in the department's history, all because he saw the lights on the squad car and panicked.